Welcome to the AskJunior Judgment Podcast. I'm Priya Sharma, and joining me today is Ben Carter.
Hello, everyone. We're excited to dive into today's topic, the landmark Kesavananda Bharati case, a monumental decision from the Supreme Court of India in 1973. This case, which lasted an incredible 69 days of hearings, fundamentally shaped the Indian Constitution and its amending power.
That's right, Ben. It's a complex case, but incredibly important for understanding the balance of power in India's democracy. At its heart, it's about the limits of Parliament's power to amend the Constitution, particularly when it comes to fundamental rights. We're talking about the very foundation of India's legal system.
Exactly. The case involved several petitions challenging amendments to the Constitution, specifically the 24th, 25th, and 29th Amendments. These amendments were attempts by the Indian Parliament to clarify and expand its power to amend the Constitution, particularly in relation to fundamental rights and property rights.
Before we get into the specifics of those amendments, let's set the stage. The case hinged on the interpretation of Article 3, which deals with the procedure for amending the Constitution. But the question was, does it also grant the power to amend? And if so, what are the limits of that power?
That's a crucial point, Priya. The judges were deeply divided on this. Some argued that Article 368 only outlined the how of amending the Constitution, while the power to amend resided elsewhere, perhaps in the residuary powers of Parliament, Article 248. Others believed the power was inherent in Article 368 itself.
And this debate was further complicated by Article 13, which states that the state cannot make any law that takes away or abridges the fundamental rights. The question was whether this applied to constitutional amendments as well. This was a major point of contention in the Golak Nath case, 1967, a previous Supreme Court decision that limited Parliament's power to amend fundamental rights.
The Golak Nath case is key background here. It essentially ruled that constitutional amendments were subject to Article 13(2), meaning Parliament couldn't amend away fundamental rights. The Kesavananda Bharati case was, in part, an attempt to overturn that ruling.
So the 24th Amendment was a direct response to Golak Nath. It explicitly stated that Article 368 grants Parliament the power to amend the Constitution, including fundamental rights, and that Article 13(2) doesn't apply to such amendments. It also changed the wording of Article 368 to include amend by way of addition, variation, or repeal, making the amending power more explicit.
Right. The 24th Amendment essentially said, we have the power to amend, and that power includes amending fundamental rights. But the Kesavananda Bharati judges still had to grapple with the question of limits. Even if Parliament had the power, could it amend anything at all?
That's where the concept of the basic structure of the Constitution came in. Some judges argued that while Parliament could amend the Constitution, it couldn't alter its fundamental framework, its basic structure. This wasn't explicitly defined, but it included things like democracy, secularism, and the fundamental rights themselves.
So it was a balancing act. Parliament had the power to amend, but that power wasn't absolute. It couldn't fundamentally alter the nature of the Indian state. This basic structure doctrine became a major point of contention among the judges.
Absolutely. The judges had wildly different interpretations of what constituted this basic structure. Some saw it as encompassing a very broad range of principles, while others had a much narrower view. This led to a very fractured judgment, with multiple concurring and dissenting opinions.
The 25th Amendment further complicated things. It amended Article 31, which deals with the right to property. It replaced the word compensation with amount, significantly weakening the guarantee of fair compensation for property acquired by the state. It also made it clear that the amount didn't have to be paid in cash.
This was a direct response to court decisions that had interpreted compensation to mean just equivalent of the property's value. The 25th Amendment essentially removed that judicial interpretation, giving the legislature more leeway in determining the amount paid.
And then there's Article 31C, also introduced by the 25th Amendment. This is arguably the most controversial part. It essentially shielded laws aimed at achieving the directive principles of state policy, found in Part 4 of the Constitution, from being challenged on the grounds that they violated fundamental rights.
The directive principles are non-justiciable, meaning they can't be directly enforced in court. But Article 31C essentially said that if a law claimed to be implementing these principles, it couldn't be challenged even if it infringed fundamental rights. This raised serious concerns about the potential for undermining fundamental rights.
It's a powerful provision, Priya, and one that sparked a lot of debate among the judges. Some saw it as a necessary tool for social and economic reform, while others viewed it as a dangerous expansion of state power that could lead to authoritarianism.
The 29th Amendment added fuel to the fire. It added several state laws, including 2 Kerala Land Reform Acts, to the 9th Schedule of the Constitution. This meant these laws were immune from judicial review, even if they violated fundamental rights.
This 9th Schedule has a long and controversial history. It's a mechanism that allows the government to shield certain laws from judicial scrutiny. The 29th Amendment's inclusion of these land reform acts further fueled the debate about the limits of judicial review and the balance of power between the legislature and the judiciary.
So, what was the final outcome? The Kesavananda Bharati judgment was a masterpiece of judicial compromise. While it overturned Golak Nath and affirmed Parliament's power to amend fundamental rights, it also established the Basic Structure Doctrine, limiting that power. The 24th Amendment was largely upheld, but Article 31C was deemed partially invalid and the 29th Amendment was upheld.
It was a deeply divided judgment, Priya, with a complex interplay of concurring and dissenting opinions. The judges couldn't agree on the precise definition of basic structure, but the principle itself remains a cornerstone of Indian constitutional law.
The case highlights the ongoing tension between the need for a flexible constitution that can adapt to changing times and the need to protect fundamental rights. It's a testament to the dynamism of Indian democracy and the crucial role of the judiciary in safeguarding its core values.
And it's a case that continues to be debated and analyzed even today, decades after the judgment was delivered. It's a fascinating and vital piece of legal history.
Absolutely, Ben. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up our discussion. We hope our listeners found it informative.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back next time with another landmark judgment to explore on the Ask Junior Judgment Podcast.